Anybody familiar with rock and roll knows the name Kenny Aronson. Even people not familiar with rock and roll know the sound. This guy, going back to the 70s, we are familiar with the music. He's played with Bob Dylan, Billy Idol, Joan Jett, Hall & Oates, the legendary and underrated Derringer Band. He's here with us today. We're very excited. Kenny Aronson, welcome to Psychobabble, man.
Nice to have you.
Good to
be here, man.
Thank
you.
I was struggling not to use the cliche, he's been holding down the bottom end, because what else do you say about a bass player? Are there any other...
You know what? I'm quite proud of being able to hold it down and make people happy. That's what I do. I always felt like, well, not when I was young. I used to play probably way too many notes than I should have. But in hindsight, though, it's always, when you're playing bass, you got to respect the song and you got to respect the artist. And that's what I like to do. I'm happy with that. I'm not about. I don't need to be a soloist or anything. That never.
Although you do have those chops.
Once in a while, if I can rise to the occasion. That's fine. But
well, let's go back to the beginning. I mean, you recorded with a band called Dust, a couple of albums. Yep. You did that early. But when most of us became familiar with you was in 1973 with the band Stories. And the single Brother Louie was huge.
Great record.
Yeah, a great record. That must have propelled you into a whole new stratosphere. I mean, okay, one day I'm a guy in a band, the next day I'm a guy with a hit single. That's a whole different world, isn't it?
Yeah, and the strange thing is, it didn't start out really that way. Stories, I don't know if you know the story behind it, but we all did session work back then. I used to do session work for Buddha artists.
Okay.
And even did tracks for Match Game at some point.
Really?
Yeah, and... Yes, and I still love those. You don't hear my stuff because I don't think it ever got used.
Yeah.
But I did some tracks for them. But to this day, I'll watch the Game Show channel and listen. There's great stuff on it.
Yeah.
But so Stories actually recorded Brother Louie as session players for another band that you might remember, a band called Exuma.
Okay.
Right.
Heard the name.
And Exuma was this band from the Caribbean. And at that point in time, Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise were working with them and recording them in a more of a sophisticated, better quality kind of way. And we went in to record Brother Louie for them.
Oh.
And so it was the Stories band.
Okay.
And then Ian Lloyd came in to do a scratch vocal for the other guy from Exuma to learn how to sing it. And when Neil Bogart heard, and Ian did it like in one take, and when Neil Bogart heard it, he went, "Screw Exuma."
That's the single.
This is the next Story single,
Oh,
and
man.
he said it's going to be number one. He said this is going to be number one,
and
it came out. Now it was written and originally recorded by Hot Chocolate.
Okay, really?
There's a Hot Chocolate version of it. They both came out around the same time. We had the definitive 3-minute, American Top 40 single, whatever, and then ours just, it came out in Cashbox. It just went.
Yeah, well,
number one,
it's
man.
hard to explain.
Left the other version in the dust.
Right, it's hard to explain to somebody who wasn't around during the heyday of AM radio. But when a single went to number one, it was everywhere, and you heard it all the time. So, well, now
great record.
and after Stories, I first encountered you on a sweltering summer day in 1976 at the old Comiskey Park when Derringer was out there. And I got to be honest, I wasn't there. I was there to see Aerosmith. I'd been up smoking pot for 2.5 days. It was 110 degrees on the infield.
Jeff Beck.
Yep.
And the bleachers caught on fire.
They did, and everybody with any sense left. I moved closer to the stage, and then Derringer came on, and I didn't want to see the opening act, but you guys just blew the roof off the dump. 60,000 people. There was a lot of talent going on in that band. That's 4 guys just making a lot of great sound.
A lot of energy in that band at the time, man. We were just on fire all the time. It's insane. I'm talking, backstage there, talking to Danny Johnson. With these memories come up, and we were like, remember, we were just talking about it before. Remember when Comiskey Bargain had caught on fire? You know, it was like great.
Now, okay, musical proficiency aside, it has to be noted that in the 70s you had the greatest hair in rock and roll.
It was thick and lustrous.
Yeah, well, I think the big hair girls from the 80s took their inspiration from your hair from the 70s. It was huge. It was like you had a Muppet on your head,
It was
man.
an explosion in a half factory.
Yeah. But it looked like a lot of work, too. This is probably wash and wear these
Came
days.
out of the shower. Oh God! Now it's like, oh, I'm losing it. Hence the hat. Hence the
man,
hat.
oh, man.
No, you know what? I don't have the patience for it anymore. The hat's just convenient.
There you go.
I still have hair.
And you still got the chops. And also
Thank
during
you.
the 80s...
I play a lot less notes these days.
Right.
I'm
Well,
just trying to play the right note. That's the most important.
Well, let me ask you about that, because a lot of times you see a band, you don't really notice the bass player until you see a really good one. And depending on who's in charge of the band, they might not want you to play so many notes. A friend of mine played with Chuck Berry once, and Chuck told him, don't play so many in-between notes. Have you had to be told that?
Yes. One of my favorite stories is when I started playing with Leslie West. Now, there was Dust, there was Stories, Hall & Oates, and Leslie West. Fourth band of my professional career.
Okay,
Leslie, Corky Lang, then replaced by Carmine,
right.
and Mick Jones from before Foreigner on rhythm guitar. And we used to do a Cream tune. So of course, because I love Jack Bruce so much as a younger person, big influence on me, I had to play busy like Jack. And Leslie turned around to me one day and said, Ken, we don't need another Jack Bruce in the band. You know, and I finally got a hint. That was like, you know,
Yeah.
so. You know, you learn that way. I mean, you know, eventually it sinks in.
Well, what was it like playing with Bob Dylan? I mean, he's such an enigma. I just picture him muttering something to you and you're trying to follow that.
Bob, okay, so the first tour I did with Bob, he was as normal as me and you, just talking. He was totally, he would communicate like a normal person, nothing weird about him. Everybody said to me, though, that I was working with a lot of people that had been with him for a while.
Okay.
And at some point, people would say to me, you know, you're really lucky to be here right now because Bob's in a good place, so Bob's kind of normal Bob. And he was fine. I mean, I remember at one point I had this jacket that I used to wear that he liked. And one day I hung it up over a lamp on the tour bus, and the lights got turned on and burnt a hole. So I sent it back to my girlfriend at the time in New York to bring it to someone to reweave the fabric. And so Bob let me wear one of his leather vests, but he would, every couple of days, he'd go, "Hey, Kenny, when are you getting that jacket back? Man? I really like you in that jacket, you know." And but you know what was weird though? You know, I went back with him for a second tour in '89, and that's when I left. And I don't know how many people know this because people think different things when they hear stories. I'd gotten cancer. I had gotten melanoma.
Oh, okay.
And I had to leave to take care of it.
Okay.
And Bob promised me my job back. And then when I was well enough, which was only a month or so, I was, you know, a little surgery, and I was ready to go back in about a month. But he had to replace me with Tony Garnier, who's still with him, who used to play with G.E. Smith and the Saturday Night Live Band.
Right.
So, you know, he invited me out to sit in for a few tunes at Jones Beach, and that's when he told me he wasn't going to change bass players again.
Ouch.
So that was pretty painful.
Yeah, but you did have the experience.
And,
Now,
you know,
is it true that you also auditioned for the Rolling Stones?
yes, I did.
Tell me about that.
Oh man! So I found out about the audition, and from what I understand, that was the period following a sort of a period of feuding between Mick and
Mick and Keith, yeah.
And Bill left. They needed a bass player. They decided instead of maybe forcing each other's personal choices on each other, I'm assuming, they decided we'll go audition people.
Okay.
So in New York City, in the United States, they had like 21 different people come in over a period of a couple of weeks, whatever. And we did it at SIR Rehearsal Studios in New York City. So at that time, a lot of the guys on the crew were friends of mine from New York. So I said, hey, can I come in like later? And what I did was I got in touch with one of the people that knew Mick,
Okay.
and he said, yeah, send me some info and I'll send it along to Mick. So I sent him a bio and a cassette tape of some things that I did. And Mick called me at home.
Really?
And I spoke to him at home, and he said he was really looking forward to having me come down. And I asked one of my friends, can I come in like later on, not in the beginning. And he said, I'll make it work. And then every couple of days he'd call me and tell me what tunes to learn. So when I finally went in, I knew the whole set list, and I just sort of brushed up on stuff at home because you listen to these songs your whole life, but maybe not necessarily play them.
Okay, right.
But there was a little bit of old and a little bit of middle period and some newer things at the time. What was that? 92. So Witchstone's record was, I don't know if it was
Steel Wheels.
Steel Wheels or something.
Yeah.
And I went in. And I came in really dressed up, and I had this really great pink jacket that I bought when I was in Japan with Joan Jett. And when my friends saw me come in with it, they said, ditch the jacket.
Really? Mick doesn't want another peacock in the hen house? Or what?
Something.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Whatever it was. So I took it off, and underneath, I had what I would normally wear with Joan, which was like a cut-off jean jacket sort of things, sleeveless, And Ronnie Wood came out to greet me. Ronnie was great. He was really friendly, really made me feel comfortable. And I went in, and I'm sort of setting up my stuff, and all of a sudden there's Mick, and then, Charlie comes in, and Keith.
Yeah.
and I realized, geez, they're all little.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like bigger than life to me,
Right.
and I'm like pretty much the same size or bigger than all of them. Charlie was like seemed like little to me.
Right.
Ronnie's my size. Keith and Mick was maybe an inch or two taller than me, and he was like not an inch of fat on him,
Right.
man. He was
Right.
lean, mean, and so as the story goes, now I heard him. I didn't think I really even finished Keith's book. But apparently, when he wrote I think there's something in his book about how some people turn down a drink from him. Well, I'm not usually one to turn down a drink, I admit.
All right.
Well, that was the day I decided to be a good boy, and I did. And Keith said, he goes to me, oh man, I've got a cooler filled with Stoli. Would you like a cocktail, And I went, I think I'll pass. I'll have maybe later. And I turned down the drink. And I think that was the one
That's
time,
when Keith
man.
said, this isn't the guy.
Oh, man, it was like, dude, what did you do? You turned down a cocktail from Keith. But it was really great playing with them. Keith was pretty loud. And I actually had the balls to ask him if he can turn down.
You told Keith to turn down.
I couldn't hear anything. I could not hear.
Right.
It was like this barrier between him and everything else. I
Right,
really
right.
couldn't hear anything.
Oh, that's so funny.
It was, and I can't believe I had balls to do that.
Yeah.
But it was great playing with him. I played with him for like almost an hour and a half.
Oh, how cool.
And then I'm packing up my stuff, and all of a sudden there's Keith and Ronnie, and Mick's taking a picture of a Polaroid, and then Ronnie walked away, and then it's me and Keith, and he took another Polaroid and gave it to me.
Oh, cool.
So
Cool, that's
but
neat.
but another funny thing about it is we were taking a break, and I was just said to Keith, I said, I got to tell you something, man. I said, since I was a kid, you guys are my heroes, and it's really a pleasure just to be here to play with you for whatever it's worth, whatever happens. And Keith goes, oh man, we're just a garage band that got lucky, and it was just like, and I was like, I just couldn't believe he
that's
said
so
that.
cool.
He was really cool. I mean, totally, just no pretension about him or anything. And Mick was really cool too, man. They were very charming, actually.
I'm not going to keep you much longer because I know you have a show tonight. But what do people need to know about what's going on with Kenny Aronson these days?
Well, I'm currently playing with the Yardbirds.
How about that?
And you know what? And I said this in an interview, but that's like really a dream come true, because the Yardbirds, I mean, when the Beatles and the Stones came out, I was, 11 years old, and I wanted to play drums because my older brother was a drummer, and I started out playing drums. But it wasn't Paul McCartney that made me want to play bass. it was arguably the Yardbirds and Paul Samuel Smith that made me really want to play bass.
Okay.
And I had all those records in mono, and I just wore the crap out of them, playing them all the time. It is so. And then I'll tell you a real quick story. A guitar player friend of mine from New York, John Paris, a blues guitar player, plays at BB King's every Monday night. We Facebook and email each other about interesting musical things. And he sent me something one day in an email, and at the end of the email he said, by the way, I think the Yardbirds might be looking for a bass player. Why don't you Facebook Jim McCarty? So I Facebooked him. I said, I'm going to make this really short. I will not bore you. Google my name to see what I've done. But my friend John Paris, whom you know, said you might be looking for a bassist. I am a huge fan. Know everything that you've ever done, pretty much, and I'm a huge Paul Samuel Smith. If you can use me, I would like to do this gig. 3 days later, he said, you got the gig.
That's insane.
Through Facebook. I mean, it was the easiest gig I ever got. Didn't have to play a note.
You just legitimized Facebook.
I mean, no, really, it was great. And, it was one of those days where I was feeling really good about myself. And I went, because other days I might, depending on how you feel, you might be like, should I email him? Should I send? You might be a little kind of whatever. But it was one of those days, I'm going to go get in touch with Jim McCarty. And I just sent him a personal message, and 3 days later I had the job, man. I mean, it was, and I love that music.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it took 45 years, but I'm only playing, and there's only one original member left. But damn, I mean, at least, and it's such a blast to play those tunes because I used to just listen to that stuff nonstop. I mean, when I play, every time I start Lost Woman, you'll see a smile on my face.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'm not talking, or any of those tunes, man.
Kenny Aronson, I want to thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
man.
taking
My
the
pleasure.
time.
Thank you very much.
Man,
I
we love what
appreciate
you
it.
do. Keep on doing what you
I'm
do.
trying, man. That's all I can do. We got to keep. What am I going to do?
Rock and roll.